So I'd like to kick us off by offering just a few thoughts about what this inner journey is and why it matters and why I care so much about it. You know, in these conferences, in our professional relationships, the way that we talk about our organizations and our successes, even the way that we talk about the social issues that we're tackling, we're often projecting our success and our expertise. We've reached 200,000 women. We just completed our Series B. We've just launched a new initiative with the European Commission. So, you know, that's all about the outer work and the outer journey. Almost never do we talk about what lies underneath. The inner journey, the personal turmoil, the emotional triggers, the fears, the anxieties, the unhealthy relationships with our egos, all of it. That is still taboo because it doesn't fit with the image of perfection, or maybe not perfection, but you know, I've got this all under control, and success that we are all trying to project, and which to some degree we have to project, to be perceived as leaders, to attract funders, to achieve the impact that we want to have in the world. But the outer journey and the inner journey are intimately linked. And we need to work on our emotions, our inner obstacles and behaviors to be able to act out of our best selves in the work we do in the world. And so what we're going to try and do this afternoon is break that taboo and smash that stigma of talking honestly about those inner obstacles and behaviors. I want to share a quote from a renowned philanthropist, who's worked for more than 2 decades on multiple continents, and she said, "The biggest obstacle to solving humanity's challenges is not the lack of resources or even will. The biggest obstacle is people's egos and fears getting in the way of working together productively." And if you think about that for a minute, you know instantly that it is true. Think about a team project or a partnership that went bad, or a one-on-one interaction that felt tense. Biggest obstacles, people's egos and fears getting in the way of working together productively. I certainly have witnessed this hundreds of times in my career, most recently earlier this week in a professional interaction that I had. So, who am I and why do I care so much about this work? And thank you for that introduction. In my previous role as the executive director of the Schwab Foundation, managing a network of over 350 social entrepreneurs from around the world, I have seen how transformational inner work, self-inquiry, personal development, it goes by a lot of different names, can be for people, for their own lives and also for their effectiveness as leaders of movements and of organizations. And over the years, I've gotten to know dozens of social entrepreneurs, the most successful, the ones with all the awards and the accolades and Ashoka and the Skoll Foundation, and all these awards. And there's a disturbing pattern to what I see play out again and again. Our sector celebrates these people, puts them on pedestals. They are selfless heroes. They are inspirational leaders. But many of them have acknowledged to me privately that their work at some point became all-consuming to the point of being personally unsustainable, triggering feelings like loss of joy, burnout, imposter syndrome, anxiety, and depression. One entrepreneur described to me feeling trapped and angry a lot of the time, but she saw no way out. Another told me about the incredible loneliness that he felt, always having to wear a mask to his staff, donors, and board members. He said no one understood him, not even his family, and underneath that mask, he felt an imposter syndrome. And he suffered from self-blame. Why haven't we achieved our mission yet? But he was too afraid to talk to anyone about it, which only reinforced his loneliness. So those are a couple of anecdotes, but what I want to say before I turn it over to our courageous panelists here is that this is not anecdotal. So in Davos, at the World Economic Forum's annual meeting a couple of years ago, we did a survey of the social entrepreneurs in the Schwab Foundation network, and we found that 50% of them suffer or have suffered from burnout or depression. So hosting this conversation is really important. And I want to applaud Alex and the leadership at the Social Innovation Summit for elevating it to the plenary stage. And the last thing I want to say is it is incredibly hard to be so vulnerable and candid in such a public setting. So I really want to thank Bas and Lise for their courage and willingness to share their inner journeys. And my job is to create this safe space. And I need your help to do that. That means you listen to their stories and what they're about to share with you with an open heart, that you suspend judgment, and most importantly, that you give them your undivided attention. If you need to make a text or a call or have a separate conversation, I invite you to step outside and then join us when you're done. Can I count on everyone's help for this? Thank you. Great. Okay, so now that we have agreed, let's dive in. And let's start with fear. No one acknowledges it. Everyone pretends to hide it. A lot of people overcompensate for it. But fear is universal, and we all have fears. So acknowledging that, Lise, I want to turn to you first. And I want you to talk to us about, a stressful period that you found yourself in a couple of years ago at Walk the Path. Your startup's cash reserves at that point were running out. You felt afraid and anxious. So if you could just kind of rewind, go back in time, and help us get inside your head. What were you experiencing in your organization, and how did that affect what you were thinking and feeling?
Yes, so I started my business in 2014, and at the time we were surviving on grants and so on, which enabled me to get a small team around me. But as you described, about 2 years ago, we had just launched our first product, and it was quite a stressful time where, as a founder, I had many challenges. As a founder, you deal with more or less everything, really, be it social media, finances, engaging with customers, and so on. And you feel you can feel a lot of burden on you, and a great responsibility. And for me, that responsibility was towards my team members. With cash reserves running out, I worried for them and the ability to keep paying them. But I also started feeling a responsibility towards the users of our product, because I could see that they were benefiting in daily life. And if we were to run out of cash and have to close down, not only would my team members lose their job, but we also wouldn't be able to bring this product to more users who could benefit from it on a daily basis. So as you sort of go through this process, and as I felt this anxiety in a way that we were not going to be able to proceed, it led to me feeling quite stressed, and also having experiences that I thought I might never have, such as not being able to sleep well. I've always been very fortunate in being a great sleeper, but in this period I couldn't really sleep, and I sometimes woke up with my heart pounding, even though I was in a state of rest, like in bed. And it feels really worrying, especially when you feel like you've always been in control. And previous jobs that I've had have also been fairly stressful. I was at JP Morgan in finance in London, but I never felt stress really until this moment. And I think it was hugely driven by this feeling of responsibility towards others.
Thank you for sharing that. I want to underscore how universal fears like this are. I want to tell you a quick story. A group of about 40 founder CEOs of social enterprises in the Schwab Foundation network went to Harvard 2 years ago. So, you know, elite, elite, elite. We all did an exercise. Everyone wrote down a fear. They were asked to write down a fear on a piece of paper, fold it up, put it in a hat. No name, anonymous. What's your greatest fear? And one by one, then you had to pick out another piece of paper and just read it out loud. You didn't know whose it was. They were all the same. Fear that I am not good enough. Fear that I will not have the impact that I want to have. Fear that I will not be present for my family, for my children. These fear that what I am doing will take a tremendous toll on my physical health. So thank you for sharing your fears. I'm curious, with a show of hands, how many people have been in a position of trying to meet payroll and felt some level of anxiety or fear about the cash flow situation of the organization or company, like Lise has described? Yeah, just look around for a minute. You are not alone. So, Lise, how did you turn things around? I mean, how did you manage to reframe your fear? Panic attacks, insomnia, waking up with sort of your heart jumping into your chest. What turned it around for you?
I think one of the first things was actually talking to others. So again, about 2 years ago, fortunately, I was in a course at INSEAD on social entrepreneurship. So I was with 40 others who were doing social entrepreneurship. And I started just discussing it with some of them and sort of asking them for advice. And a couple of them looked a little bit worried because I think they had tried to be in this situation. And I was quite lucky to connect with somebody who also works as a sort of personal coach. And she offered to speak to me a few times, so we stayed in touch, and I just kind of said it to her as it was, really. I didn't really hold anything back, and that was helpful. And then I think what was really driving the situation for me was this fear of failure, because I think we often talk about startups as failing. So this startup failed, that other startup fails, 9 out of 10 fail. It's a lot about failing. And I started thinking, well, what's the worst that can happen, really, for me and those others? You know, the people in my team, I had wanted them to work with me because I thought they were great. And so why wouldn't others think they would be great? And they would probably get a job quite quickly. And for myself, I also thought, what's really the worst that can happen? I still have my health generally, and I'm sure that everything can be okay, even if the startup fails, it will still be a success because I would have learned a tremendous amount. We would have launched a product that was benefiting people, and that would kind of be okay. So for me, it was an acceptance that even the worst case scenario is something I can accept.
That's a great insight. Thank you. As was your earlier point, that you actually allowed yourself to be real and be authentic, to be vulnerable and show your real self, to take your mask off. You found that mentor. You were real. And are you still in touch with her today? I mean, what sort of, now fast forward to present day, okay, Walk the Path is in a different situation. Cash flow wise, you're growing, but we all have anxiety and fears. How is it that you sort of, I guess, cope with them today?
Yes, so I wouldn't say I have found the perfect solution by any means. But, when I started 5 years ago, I was a sort of sole founder. And a lot of funds and so on that I met were saying, we don't invest in sole founders. We only invest in teams and so on. And I sort of thought, well, I'm in this situation. I'm a sole founder. I had somebody else with me who was 1 day a week. So we kind of bore quite different parts of the burden, really. And I did feel quite alone with it. But that was my situation, and I sort of thought probably being a sole founder is okay. I didn't really see what was the big deal. Of course, you feel a bit lonely, but there are other people you can rely on in your network than necessarily a direct co-founder. But I think what I've implemented now really is to try and have people who maybe weren't there from the beginning, but they act as sole founders. This is incredibly important. So right now I have 2 others in my team that I can completely rely on and trust. And one of them was actually in London today presenting in a conference, and people I know who were in the audience were telling me she's fantastic. And it's so great to hear, because that's exactly what I also wanted, was to empower somebody to present as if it's theirs, because I want them to feel that. And it gives me great relief that I have others who can step up and be spokespeople and other things that I know that I can completely trust and rely on.
Yeah, this notion of trust, of shared ownership, collective leadership is so important, and it really does take inner work to be able to be that kind of a leader. Beth, let me now turn to you. So in a way, you are the poster boy, if I can, okay, for what a successful entrepreneur should look like. Though that recognition brings its own baggage, as you know. I think a trap is how you called it. But a lot of people in this room surely dream of your kind of success. Your crowdfunding campaign was successful, as you mentioned in your talk earlier. Your team expanded to 40 within a year. All of a sudden, you had 60,000 customers to service. So let's set aside, the magazine covers and what your rapid ascent looked like from the outside. I know all of us in this room really want to hear the story of what that ride was like on the inside.
Yeah, I think I in the presentation, I kind of tried to give you a tip of the iceberg. It's great to be in that situation of fast success, but it's also it's a one direction, which for me the problem at that point in time was also that I had never led a team. Myself, I never built a company. I was always in non-profit before that, and I was in innovation, creative. I'd done art school. So how do you run a company? And it's really cool. It's really cool to do something that you've never done before. But if you do that for a very long period, and you're taking all kinds of risks, because the risk we took was just to give you a bit of a magnitude. I was telling you the 7.5 million we got from people. I know the moment I was with my there were 25,000 phones we sold. We didn't know how to make phones with the team. We didn't know how to do stuff in the supply chain. But the problem was that I had to transfer money to the Chinese factory, and that was basically the point of no return, because the money was still sitting there, and I knew if I send it to that factory, then they're either going to make it or not. Maybe it disappears in one black hole or something. But so I was sitting on my behind my computer, and it was a Sunday. I still know, and I had my kids running around downstairs, and I was doing everything myself. So even the transfer, and it was ridiculous, because I at a certain point I was like, okay, now I'm going to transfer the 3.5 million euros for them to start working. And I just put it in there. I started pushing the button, and then it went, So, what? So, you can only do up to 250,000 at once. So I had to do all these batches, and every batch I did felt like, oh. Because I knew at that point, like, this is me going from a creative, an artist, to an entrepreneur. And it really felt like that. I knew, I literally, the night before, I was in my bed with my girlfriend, my wife, crying, out of really, literally crying out of. I didn't know what to do, and she helped me through that, and that was so valuable. She came to me and she said, "Boss, don't be a pussy, man. You just." How many people get the chance to do something like this? with so many people putting trust in you. You know, just enjoy that. Enjoy the fact that you started something that you look at yourself as a symbol. And I know those words. Look at yourself as a symbol for something that might go. So even if you cannot do it, if the phone will never be there, people will forgive you in a few years. You know, some people will be angry, but you know, it's the symbol that they will be angry with. It's nice to say, because, you know, at the same time I went to after I made the payment, I went, you know, to pick up my kids from school, and then I got like 10 moms already saying, "Oh, boss, I bought your phone." So it was that was the symbol talk was, you know, a bit too early. But anyway, no. So that's really the moment, and it's you know, I know from that point on, you know, we hired people and we went down that road, and you know, you know, they say it, if it gets better, it gets harder with a company. If it gets worse, it gets harder as well. You know, so it will only get harder. And you know, it's not very optimistic speech, but believe me, it also gets more fun, right? So, but it gets harder.
So let me follow up on. So one entrepreneur told me, you know, everyone, you know, glamorized. You know, everyone knows the highs of the highs. No one knows the depths of the lows. What were the depths of your lows? What do you want to share with us?
Well, yeah, I mean, Mike is so the same woman. Luckily, she had to pick me up from the floor once, where I was lying already. After I had to do a presentation in Switzerland, I couldn't get over the doorstep, collapsed, and was laying there already for half an hour, I don't know how long. She didn't know what to do. She brought me to the mental health clinic, to the crisis center, saying, you know, I have no idea what to do with it. I physically totally collapsed after doing Fairphone for 3-4 years. And I didn't sleep for weeks. I was traveling to China, you know, every other couple of days, stayed there for one night, go back, and then I didn't, you know, everything was just going, your body can't cope with that, right? 80 hours of work and doing all that stuff. So I just collapsed, and I know we went there, and that's the really stupidest things, because of course I saw it coming, but I didn't. I was totally neglecting it. But I came there and I said, you know, two things. And I was talking to the psychiatrist. Either you fix me, or you take me in. There's no there's no other way, because I'm a CEO of a company. I don't want to hear you telling me that you can be missed, because I can't. I'm in an investment round, and I was at a point in that time that if we were burning cash because we were delayed with the delivery of the phone, we were burning cash so fast that the money that people already paid for the second crowdfunding round, the 10 million, we were paying that to our employees, which meant that we couldn't even buy the phones anymore from the factory for the people that already paid for the phones. And I saw that going and going on. And the only solution to that is sell more phones. And that's scary, because you're selling something, because it's such a mind. Well, you know what I want to say. But anyway, so what happened in that situation is that I had to raise cash, 5 million, within like 3-4 weeks. Otherwise, you know, we would have hit this cluster thingy. So we did. That was the weird thing. So at the moment I said, you know, you either fix me or you take me in. Well, they fixed me, because they gave me tranquilizers, all kind of stuff. I slept for a week, and I woke up and go like, oh, but you know, actually, it's not too bad. I can do this. So I did some fundraising, and then we got the 5 million in, and I thought it was God, obviously, because, you know, if you can get 5 million within 3 weeks. And that's when, you know, when partying and doing all kind of weird stuff, when my body really went like, you know, no, and I had to actually, I think after that I even worked for like 3 consecutive months. After that, going to work, we were safe, Fairphone was safe, but even then, going to work crying on oxazepam, tranquilizers, because I got them to, you know, because of needing to sleep, and I used them to actually get through the day for months and months. So yeah, I've gone through like all the boundaries I probably could have gone through in that period.
And again, I feel so privileged that you are willing to share that journey with us. Thank you. Those are some pretty dark lows. If I could put a label on that, and I hope you don't mind, I hope that's okay, I would call that a burnout. And I feel that your willingness to speak so openly and publicly about your burnout is commendable and maybe even invaluable to people in this room who are burning the candle at both ends, so to speak, and at risk of a burnout themselves. And I want to ask you to, I want to probe a little bit more, okay, if it's not too painful. I want to know, you spoke about a couple of them just now, but what signs were your body giving you that you were on the cusp of burnout, and why did you not pay attention to them? I also want to know, when we prep for this session, you said at that time you almost felt proud that you worked through multiple burnouts, and I want to know if you still feel that way, or what would you go back and tell yourself pre-burnout about that experience? What would you do differently?
Yeah, so I was under so much pressure that, and I was kind of surprised I didn't burn out yet. So I thought, well, it's not going to happen. I'm a tough motherfucker. So, I can get through these things. So, and I thought I could do anything. I just give me something, I'll get through it, I'll fix it. The signs were that I was getting on a managerial level, which I'd never done. I was getting pretty distant. Basically, we were talking about self-organizing organizations. I was like, guys, here's holacracy, go with it. Have fun with each other, and I don't want to be involved in running this company anymore. So I had this kind of like, in that time they started calling me the reluctant CEO. Like I told everyone, oh, it's so bad, and so that was the emotional side of it. Physically, it's very simple. I had panic attacks. I couldn't sleep. I sweating all the time, waking up, total, you sweat, and it's just. And seriously, at a certain point, that you get suicidal tendencies. And not saying that I wanted to commit suicide or anything, but just like you're in a plane, and I'm pretty sure a lot of people know this feeling. You're in a plane or you're in a car, and you think like, what the fuck, if it's yeah. If believe me, anxiety attacks, they paralyze you, and the only thing you can think about is like 100 dogs running after you. It's like, I want to get away from this feeling. Mike, my wife, had to pick me up at the grocery store when I couldn't choose between the vegetable lasagna or the meat lasagna. And that would collapse me, and that would be like me in a corner crying because I couldn't choose. It's yeah, those kind of things.
What would you go back and tell yourself?
Yeah, that's a good question. The weirdest thing of all is that I wouldn't have wanted to miss it. I think that's the weirdest thing of all, because it also gave me a lot of insight into my own mechanisms, which in a very, very high speed kind of uncontrolled environment have had to develop. And so it was kind of a manic ride, I guess. There were a lot of highs and a lot of lows, and I guess the only thing I would want to tell me was like, try to bring them a bit more together. That you have the highs and the lows, that they're not as much, because I was messing myself up as well, because I had to get my mind out of things, and I had times I was with Gauck, the president here in Germany, getting a prize, and then going back to Holland in a train, just doing quickly my daughter's birthday, going out night clubbing until 8 in the morning, and then being on a flight at 10 to China, and then doing a full week of meetings in Hong Kong, Shanghai, Shenzhen, and I thought it was, was totally fine. So it's burning the candle really at both sides. And the stupidest thing is that when you're burning the candle both sides, you start getting less effective in work.
Yeah.
And what you think and what you do then is that you try to compensate that with more work.
Yeah.
And that is, it's like, oh, I can't cope with this, let's work. So it's weird. It's all these things.
It's a very dangerous cycle to get into. I'm going to open it up for both reflections and questions from the audience. So while they're getting the mics ready, I would have a couple of messages also, because I have seen many entrepreneurs up close suffer from burnout. It's a really scary thing, and I would just plead you to do everything you can to learn about it, and if you think you recognize some of those signs in yourself, to take immediate action. One entrepreneur, in giving advice, sort of said, it's like when you're in an airplane, put your own oxygen mask on first before helping others, and you really do need to think about your own mental health that way. You cannot be of service to others if you are not in a position to be able to take care of yourself. Another entrepreneur who is in whose products are in more than 40 countries, and sort of they're going to hit 100 million sales. I don't know, sometime in the next year. Suffered a burnout, and he said what he realized through that is people are like batteries, that if you deplete yourself, if you go to a negative charge, when you plug in again, and by the way, plugging in again is not like a 2-week vacation at the beach and then you're fine again. That is not how burnout works. It is a much longer recovery time than that, but that you never achieve the full charge again, that there is some residue that will stay with you forever. And that really does differ person to person, and if others in the audience may want to comment on that as well, but I guess those are important learnings that some of the entrepreneurs in the Schwab Network had to learn the hard way, and so I just wanted to pass those on to you. We do have some time for questions, so I'm going to take a few comments/questions from the audience. I'd like you to introduce your name. And if you have a question for the panelists, wonderful. If you just feel inspired based on what you've heard to share something of your own experience or how what they have said resonated with you, I welcome that also. I would ask you please to keep your comments to under a minute, if that would be okay. And we'll take a few from the audience before we come back to Lisa and Baz again. So I see one person here. Are there other hands? Other courageous souls? Okay, 1, 2, 3, and 4. That's great. Go ahead.
So firstly, thank you very much for sharing these intimate moments. I think not many people dare to do that, so I think I speak for many of us here that we really appreciate that. I'm very interested in what would you recommend to other people, and how do you now practice self-care? Because I understand maybe you don't want to take this experience from yourself, because this was important for your personal journey, but how do you protect yourself these days from having this reoccur again, and what would you give as a recommendation to other people?
That's great. And your name?
Caroline, sorry.
Great. Okay, Carol. So that's one question. Right here? I'm going to collect 3 or 4, and then we'll come back to the panelists.
Hi, I'm Luciana, and my question is for you and for all the social entrepreneurs in the room. If you ever feel like whatever you do, the world is not going to change, so like if you feel defeat, frustration, and how have you cope with that? Because I have recently changed from the commercial world to the more meaningful, but sometimes I say, okay, no matter what me or the organizations do, this is just too bad. So that's my question.
Yeah, maintaining your own resiliency in the face of what are some really scary trends. There was someone over here, right? Yes.
Yes, thank you so much. My name is Svenja. I was wondering about people in your immediate, family or friends or whatever. You already talked about your wife, how she supported you in that. And I guess my question really is like, for the entrepreneur in our family or in our circle of friends, how can we support them while not being in the same position as they are? What can we do for them? Or in other words, what would you have needed from you and the people around you? Just maybe some ideas or tips for this kind of support that we can give to others. Thank you.
That's a great question also. And there was one more. Yes, right here on the end.
Hi, my name is Layla, and my question is for Buzz as well. What was your thriving force behind everything when you felt really, really low? Like, was it the fear of disappointing the people, or the pressure of handling all the money, or was it actually the vision you had in mind? Or did you have a shift in thriving forces that actually made the change at the end?
Great. Okay. So a lot for us to work with. Thank you. So Lisa, let me turn to you first. We have what do you do now for self-care and your recommendations to others? How do you cope with fatalism? What can family members and friends sort of do to be supportive? And your driving forces, whichever you'd like to take.
Yeah, so in terms of what friends and others can do to support, I think it's really important actually to have close friends and family that you can talk to as an entrepreneur, especially if you're doing it on your own, because then there's no one else that you can really rely on. So I think inviting entrepreneurial friends to kind of share with you their frustrations and what's happening at some level of depth, because I also have a lot of friends who are interested in what we do, and they will share things I post on social media as a company, which by the way never really reflects reality, right? It's like anything on social media. What you're sharing looks great, but it doesn't necessarily say what's behind it. So I think there's a lot of sort of what I would call maybe superficial support, which clearly is really nice and well-intended. But I think it's sometimes nice to actually offer the time to go a bit deeper than that and be that sounding body and maybe create that space where it's okay to share. Because a lot of people don't necessarily understand the entrepreneurial journey if they're not on it themselves and they have a well-paying job in a big company. So it can be quite difficult to have that. I have a lot of friends who say, I would never take this risk that you're taking. It's not for me at all. And that's also fine, right? For them to self-reflect and share, and then you can sort of better perhaps engage on a deeper level. So I would just encourage to prod maybe and ask really close questions.
Thank you.
Yoga.
Sorry, yoga?
One simple, it's yoga for yourself. It's taking care of your, that is the hard one. I think one of the hardest things is not to be able to take care of the people around you while you see that you are really affecting them. So turn the other way around is also the question, how can you not get lost in supporting the one that actually is in a burnout or is in this situation? And I think that starts with what you mentioned as well, making sure that you have several people you can talk with. I think the whole entrepreneurs kind of AA meetings would be like super valuable. It's just
absolutely.
It's being a CEO of a company which in a social enterprise aligns with everybody's values who work there. People are passionate, and people take every decision that you make at the top, as they see it or not, but at least they know that you are the final, you have the final shot. So they take everything personally, and they should, because it's their mission. It's a mission-driven enterprise. So everything is a debate, and especially with Fairphone, we're in a situation where, there were so many debates that in the end people come to me asking, "Boss, can you please make that decision because we think it's unethical." So, and sometimes you need to make these decisions, and being able to just talk about it with somebody who's not in the company, but who knows entrepreneurship and who knows employees, that's really valuable. I never had that, and I have missed that for sure. And that will help also that when you get home, you don't have to bother your family with all that stuff that you're still crunching in your head with. But also take care of your body. Just, you know, it's one of the things that I'm doing now is I'm actually going through the wellbeing program, you know, which is offered by a whole bunch of organizations, which is it's a luxury. You know, it's a luxury for me, but it's, you know, the retreats, the yoga, and taking the time to actually reflect on, you know, what happened with my body. It's 2.5, 3 years ago that I had this situation. I was out of the company for half a year, and it's not over yet, I can tell you. Yeah, so not in a bad way, you know, I've learned from it, but you do have to take care of your body, and your mind will also get more relaxed with it. So I think that is, and especially this, you know, your family and friends. It's a tough one, because if you're in the situation, the first thing that happens is that shit comes from all directions. You know, it's like, but you're never home. It's like, no, shit, I have to be with my kids, but I need to solve this, and that is, you know, I think one of the things that we're working on now. So I took Maaike with me in the process of the kind of the healing, because we have to realign from her doing the whole family and having this guy that is, you know, because for the rest of the world, I'm on that footstep, and it's like, oh, boss goes to the Queen and goes to that, you know, speaks with Al Gore, it's fantastic, you know, all these prizes, and she gets the shit. So how do you deal with that part, that you also give recognition to the ones that are not on stage? And that is what we're dealing with. That's healing as well, between the people that have been there for you, and what needs to be done. Because I cannot just say, you know, I have that well-being and I'm going to fix myself. It's them as well. You need to fix a lot of things.
Well, there are so many important insights that you both just shared that I want to build on for a few minutes, and then I'm told that we are coming shortly to a close. I know that you'll be around a little bit longer if during the break people want to follow up with you both with their questions, and I'm going to come to you just in a moment for your concluding thoughts. But you know, sort of, I've done significant research on this as well, because, like I said, I've seen how transformational self-inquiry, inner work can be for one's emotional and personal resilience, and again, for their effectiveness as a leader. And there are some really important insights that they both just shared that I want to tease out further. One is this idea of what is a beautiful term that someone shared with me, of developing this personal board of directors. Okay, so the Entrepreneurs AA or peers, your mentor, you know, and that's relevant no matter what level you are in the hierarchy, okay? Even if you're just starting out. Who is your personal board of directors? Someone who doesn't have a dog in the fight, who is not an investor, who is not a board member, who is not a staff member that you have to be brave to, okay? You can take the mask off, you can be vulnerable, you can share what's really eating at you, and chances are, you know, they can help you reframe the problem or find a different perspective, or, you know, sort of see it from a different angle. Or maybe they have the same problem and you feel a little bit less alone. And that actually is backed up by neuroscience. So there's a huge research effort underway at the University of Virginia right now, which demonstrates that the single most important predictor of personal well-being is social support. Number one. That when the self feels very small, you become hypervigilant and territorial and afraid. And when the self becomes bigger, flush with trusted relationships, you become open and curious and trusting. So cultivate your support system. What are your support mechanisms? That's really a question that I would leave with all of you. You also touched on this idea of physicality. Yoga, breathing exercises. I know an entrepreneur who received the TED Audacious Prize who said he swears by breathing exercises. That's what meditation is also. If you have a tendency to always have your mind go into the past or always project what will happen, you know, mindfulness is about trying to stay in the present moment and be present. Similarly, how can you be present in your interactions with others? I know a lot of enterprises and social change leaders who do check-ins and check-outs at the beginning of meetings with their colleagues, maybe who start an important meeting with a group meditation. I mean, seriously, and I'm kind of like, oh, this is a little too touchy-feely for me. No, really, this is quite meaningful and impactful. And most importantly, there's a great quote that someone shared with me, who really try to be much more human-centered in their work. It's so easy to become very transactional. We're under-resourced, we're trying to achieve so much, we have so many things to do, and you can become very transactional in your professional relationships. Taking the time to check in with people as humans, what's going on in their lives, thinking about how you can offer extra support to someone who's going through a difficult period in their personal life. These are the things that really build authentic, trust-based relationships and make a huge difference in your own well-being and others. And the last thing I would say, sort of before turning back to both of you, is therapy or a professional coach. I mean, a lot of people have found that they're at a point where they really need something that's more tailored and more in-depth to where they're at. And it might range from dealing with identity issues. So, you know, I'm so angry, my anger fuels me, my outrage, and that can be motivational fuel, but it can also be toxic. So coping and dealing with those kinds of feelings. Similarly, ideas of identity, sacrifice, the pressure to save the world. My identity as the founder of my organization, that's my title, that's my identity. What is your identity outside of work? How do you cultivate a sense of identity outside of your professional endeavors? Those are the kinds of questions that a coach or a therapist can really help you wrestle with, as well as many entrepreneurs I've interviewed and talked to about this, trauma. Trauma is something, buried trauma, maybe it's even part of the reason that we devoted our careers to social change in the first place, but it shows up in your professional relationships, and healing from past trauma and making peace with it can be transformational in terms of your personal well-being and in terms of your resilience as a leader. So those are the few of the things that I've learned from both Bas and Lise in our discussions to prepare for this panel, and also what I've learned in all the conversations that I've had and interviews I've conducted with entrepreneurs. And I would just love to turn it over to both of you to just wrap us up and conclude with any thoughts about your own self-care, where you are in your journey, with any reflections about, you know, Bas, as you said, you would do it all over again, you know, sort of what is the inspirational message that you would offer to others as well as you go about this inner work that you're both doing. So over to both of you.
Yes, thank you. So I guess it's really well validated that, of course, exercise, meditation, and so on is really important, and I feel that too. But I think it's also personal what might be your kind of break time. So for many years before I started a startup, I always enjoyed making jewelry. And I would have, for instance, 8 hours in a day where I was making jewelry, where I forgot about drinking water, eating food, going to the toilet, was not checking any phones. I was just in that world of making jewelry because I enjoyed it. And it really just got me to just forget everything else around me. And since I started a startup, I haven't really made jewelry. And, I do think it's really important to spend that time on those things that you enjoy, which aren't work. I also write. I find it really actually quite therapeutic to write down things that I'm experiencing. And again, I used to do creative writing before I did a startup, but kind of when everything gets to you and you're in the middle of end of year accounting and all these other boring things that you have to do, you prioritize those because otherwise you'll get fined or whatever else it might be. But I do think it's incredibly important to carve out time for those other things that matter to you and where for you it's meditative. And for me, I would say that's jewelry and other activities are for me like meditation might be to others.
Lovely. That's great advice. Bas.
Yeah, let me focus a bit on how I've started a new company. Because it's a thrill ride and it's super fun, and now you get to see kind of the dark side of the things. But there's so much fun in setting up a company and growing it, and especially a social enterprise, when there's purpose involved. So when I stopped as CEO of Fairphone, which has been, I've been planning that for 2.5 years after my burnout to actually create the context in which I could say, well, the company I'm not a given in the company anymore. So I took my I took my chance, and I took a sabbatical, 4 months. And one of the things I've learned through that sabbatical, because I thought I'm going back to creative, I'm going back to the fuzzy front end of innovation and do stuff when there's not even a business case. But actually what happened is the opposite. After 2 months, I sat down with a girl who wanted to set up a company, wanted me as a co-founder, and I said, I'm going to advise you. And I think 2 months after that, I signed the papers of the company, and we're already with 9 people, 10 people, and we're up and running. But I'm doing it together with somebody. I'm not the sole founder. Fantastic. For me, what I've learned, I should not do this alone, especially when you're into complex situations. Social enterprises are very complex, especially when it's system change agents, when you're dealing with social issues. So you want to have somebody, you want to have a peer. I want to have a peer. So that's what I did. And I'm not the CEO, which is fantastic. I get to deal with the fun stuff, the financials, and building the brand and that kind of stuff. So building a structure around that you are not, because that is what I think the bigger things I've learned is that you are trapped, that you feel trapped in your own organization of growth. And you said something about a plane. Well, I felt like flying a plane while we were building it without even knowing how to fly. So I don't want to be in that situation anymore, that the only way is forward or crash. So a good financial plan, a planning on which investment you want when, and stick to it. And also make sure that you don't end up in a, that others are going to actually determine what you should be doing and where you should be getting your money from, because that's one of the situations I got in as well. I was the head of the company, had all the responsibility, but I didn't have the voting rights. So those two combined, one is more structure and how you set up your company. The other one is more personal, like, okay, do I want to do it together or alone? That really helps me to actually have I love what I'm doing, and I still want to be a social entrepreneur, and I love building companies. I just don't like making them even bigger than when they are at a certain point, but that's what I do.
Yeah, complementarity skill sets and nourishing multiple identities and experiencing that flow outside of your social change endeavor. I think that is absolutely brilliant advice from both of our panelists. I know we're out of time. We're going to have to leave it there. Please, can I ask all of you to join me in thanking Bas and Lise for sharing your inner journeys with us today. Yes. Yeah, I think they deserve that. I think they do. Well done, guys. Well done. Thank you.